heart rate variability is like watching your heart rate with a magnifying glass. So you can tell so much more from the heart rate variability. And from a doctor's point, it's also the beauty of it that the very basic functions in your body, the heart rate compared to your breath, that reveals so much about the state of your physiology.
Well, Dr. Torkil Færø, thank you so much for being on this podcast. And I'm just so happy that you can find the time to speak and just to educate us and speak about what you know so much about, which is heart rate variability. I've already kind of discussed with you just now that I know of HRV and I know that it's a big deal. And I know that people monitor it and use it as a way of measuring their health. But I want to know more about it. And that's why I'm so excited to speak with you today. So, first of all, how are things over there in Oslo? How's the weather? Like, how is everything?
Actually, the weather was just this minute, a lot of thunder and hailstorm.
Mm.
Just for an hour, so it's even in the news, it's not so common here in Oslo. It's usually a dry place, so it was a lot of trouble, something blew out from where they're it's not supposed to be, and so on. So it's probably getting better. It's getting towards summer here in Norway, but slowly, summer is short here, maybe 2 months at the best. So I'd love to go to your place, to the Caribbean, and
Yes, this is such an interesting topic, heart rate variability, and I'm sure that the listeners um, probably have heard of it, probably have wearables where they're actually monitoring it and they know that having a good HRV is a good thing for your health. But I'm sure a lot of people would agree with myself that that's probably where the knowledge stops. Like they know they need to have a good HRV, but they don't know why or what exactly it's about or how to improve it, which is really interesting that you can actually improve it. You can actually do things to make it better. So I wanted to kind of dive into this topic with you. So first of all, just in case anybody doesn't know about you or about your work, can you just go into where this all started for you? You have an amazing book called The Pulse Cure. So how did you go from being, a general practitioner to writing a book about heart rate variability?
I'm a Norwegian General Practitioner and a ER physician, and have been that for 26 years. And some 6 years ago, I almost stumbled across the term heart rate variability from a book, The Body Keeps the Score, from Bessel van der Kolk, an American psychiatrist, a huge best-selling book. And I had never heard of it before, even as a doctor. And I understood that heart rate variability is a measurement of how your autonomic nervous system works, but also of your physiology in general. And that we would be able to measure that with the heart rate and, watches and rings and all the new technology. I was just so intrigued by it and started using it and understanding that this is maybe one of the most important biometrics that we as doctors, and of course, the good thing about it is that people have it in their own hands. So they have control, and not only that it's something that we measure from the lab or so in the doctor's office, we have it available at all times. And I would probably have to explain what heart rate variability is in the first place. So, heart rate variability is the variation between heartbeats. And the heart doesn't beat at a very steady pace, like a metronome, like a watch, an old-fashioned watch that is, a clock. It will beat with some different intervals between the heartbeats. And when we breathe in, the heart beat will go up a little bit, and when we breathe out, the heart rate will go down a little bit. And that is when we are in the restful mode, the parasympathetic mode. Many people have probably heard about that. But when we are stressed from whatever reason, whether we are mentally stressed or we are in the week before the menstruation in the menstrual cycle, or we have been eating something with gluten and we cannot tolerate it, or we have been training too much, or being out in the heat too much. So many different reasons that can stress our system. When we are in the stress state, the heart will beat at a very steady pace, close to that of a metronome. And of course, then the wearables like the Garmin watches, the Oura rings, the Whoop bands, and so on, they will pick out these differences in the variations in the heartbeats. And then they can determine whether you are in the stressful state or in the restful state. And of course, with the big data from so many users and algorithms and artificial intelligence, they can see whether your stress balance is sustainable or not, whether it's compatible with good health. Because a good heart rate variability is associated with good health outcomes from of all kinds. So this is why it's so important to know this metric and to be able to track it, which could help people improve their health. I often compare it to having a dashboard to your physiology, just like you have in your car. You kind of have the speed, you have the pattern of movement, you have the temperature, and you have the oxygen level, which is really important biometrics that these wearables usually can track all of these biometrics. So it's like, yeah, it's like having a dashboard. And of course, when you control the speed and you can see how much energy do you have, what will affect your energy level, it's so much easier to maneuver. And we are not really equipped from nature to be aware of these things. We have excellent senses towards the outward threats that has been throughout evolution, throughout the millions of years. Excellent eyesight, excellent hearing, excellent taste and smell and sense of touch.
Mm.
And these have been prioritized throughout the millions of years. And the sense of our inner state has never really been necessary. But we need it now. So because now we get sick from the inside and out,
Yes.
And historically it was from the outside in, it
Mm.
was bacteria, it was damage, it was people trying to eat us, right?
Right.
That was threatening our lives.
Yeah. Do you know what, it's so interesting. So what you've just said has really made it really clear to me about what heart rate variability is. So when you're in a restful state, your heart rate beats at a certain pace per minute, but there is a slight difference between each beat. Like sometimes the gap is a bit shorter and sometimes the gap is a bit longer. And I guess in a relaxed state, that shows your body is flexible, right? It's kind of able to kind of go a little bit quicker and then a little bit slower, and it kind of has that beautiful wave-like kind of oscillations in between each heartbeat. But then when you go into a stress state, your heart rate becomes more rigid and it becomes like the gaps in between each heartbeat become more similar to each other. So if someone, let's say, is wearing their wearable, so let's say I see you're wearing the Whoop and you're wearing the Aura ring, so you're not
And
sure
and the
to,
Garmin and the Garmin.
you've got everything going there. I need to get me some of those because they look like they'd be really useful for me. I used to have a Whoop, but not anymore. So if someone's wearing their wearable and they're sitting on the couch and their heart rate variability reading is low, which means that it's the difference between each beat is similar to each other, which means they're kind of in a stress state. So that would be a bad sign, right? For like if they're just relaxing, but
Yeah,
they're got a
at,
low
at least
HRV.
at least if you're trying to relax, it's a bad sign.
Right.
We are supposed to stress. We are supposed to push ourselves. We're
Yeah.
supposed to have hard times.
Yeah.
But
Like
we're
during
not, we're,
exercise, your heart
yeah,
HRV will be low.
exercise, that's right. Or when
Yeah.
you're doing a presentation, or when
Mm.
you're with friends and having a blast, that,
Mm.
and we need that too. That we need the intervals, we need to take breaks and relax as well. So
Mm.
the problem is not necessarily that we are stressing too much or
Yeah.
too hard, but that we're not recovering. We're not putting enough
Right.
time into recovery, and we may even think that we are recovering while we are, eating something that we cannot tolerate, and our body is not recovering, even if we're just lying on the couch watching Netflix. It could be because we're drinking alcohol. Alcohol is the worst stressor of all,
Interesting.
according to Whoop. Yeah.
Okay, so the
So we may
HRV
be
goes
thinking
right
that we
down when you
are,
have
oh
alcohol.
yeah, yeah, that's the worst thing. Yeah, I can only tolerate now drinking alcohol maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and I'm not much good at anything the next 2 or 3 days,
So would
and my heart
HRV
rate variability show it. Yeah.
and would it be low for hours afterwards, for days afterwards?
Days. According to Whoop,
Days.
it will take 5 days until you're back at the same recovery rate as you were before you were drinking.
Wow.
And that, of course, at least when you're taking like 3 or 4 units of alcohol. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned gluten as well. So how many
Mhm.
days, let's say, I mean, is that normal for is that for everybody or just for some
It's
people?
not, it's, it seems to be for more people than we would think. So you don't need to have celiac disease or some obvious gluten intolerance, but it will still often affect your heart rate variability. So, for example, my daughter was 18 this Saturday, and there was, of course, lots of cakes, and there was so many cakes that we even had cakes yesterday, which was Sunday. And even though I'm hardly doing anything, my stress levels are high just because of these cakes. And I would never have thought about this before I started tracking my heart rate variability. And the first time I understood this was I was working as a doctor. And of course, you have the same kind of work before and after lunch. And usually for lunch, I used to have a salad. And then for one day, some colleague was probably quitting or having a birthday, or for some reason we had cake for lunch. And I just decided, okay, let's skip the salad and just have two large pieces of cake. And then my heart rate just went through the roof, or at least went from like 60 to 75 for hours afterwards. And the only difference was what I had been eating. And I had never, even as a doctor, even it never would have occurred to me that food would be stressful. I understood that, there are healthier food and less healthier food, but that it could stress you and drain you of energy because I would feel tired. I would feel like I had a small flu or something. And some hours after that, I would not feel up to going for some exercise or something because my body has been dealing with this, with the cakes. And that is just some of the surprises that most people get when they are tracking their system. And when I'm talking about micromanaging like this, that you can see it, from before until after lunch, that's usually only the Garmin watches that would be able to let you see that so easily. Because you can just see, just push the button and you will see your stress levels.
Mm.
And you will get a graph 24/7 that you can see that, okay, the stress was, from 12:30 to 4 o'clock because of those cakes.
Wow.
So, for example.
So someone could actually watch their HRV and actually see which foods, for example, agree with them and which don't agree with them. You can actually see on the wearable.
Absolutely,
That is
absolutely. And
fascinating.
I would think second to alcohol. So I don't think I've met anyone that hasn't cut down on their alcohol consumption after using the wearables when you see the physiological price of alcohol. So, and second to that, that would be the effect of food, that they will see that certain foods will drain them of their energy, and often food that they will use as comfort foods.
Mm.
Foods that like candy or cakes or ultra
So
processed food,
sugar,
the
gluten, like
sugar, gluten, yeah,
ultra
bakery goods,
processed. Yes.
ultra processed, yeah. So they would see that, and once you understand that, and you can, minimize that kind of food, you get more energy. Many people lose symptoms that they would have had for like decades,
Mm.
that were caused by the food that they were eating. So I get lots of messages, on Instagram and so on, and social media from people telling me that. So
I think it's such a motivation because you think eating food that's not good for you, you think, oh, it's just limited to the gut. Oh, I feel a bit bloated, and oh, it's just kind of localized around that area. You never think that it's actually spreading to your cardiovascular system and like your heart is even disrupted by it. And so quickly as well, so quickly after having it. So
yeah.
that's definitely a motivation, and it's a really kind of direct. It's almost like a direct way that you can see what food is good for you and what food isn't so good for you, and it's a good way of kind of getting direct feedback from it. So, I mean, if this is so important, how come doctors haven't heard of this or they don't know much about it?
I don't know. At least in Norway, the Pulse Cure, the book has been just a tremendous success in
Yes, go into the
Norway. So
Pulse Cure. Yes.
it's kind of changed everything. So I think in Norway, the doctors didn't know about it either when the book first came out. But now I would think most doctor here would know about it and how you can use it. And it shouldn't be a surprise to any doctor because the first thing we look for to consider the state of the patient, that is the heart rate. If I get a patient into the ER and the heart rate is 120, I know that this is serious. I need to do something right away. This is a crisis, usually. And of course, that is a huge variations in heartbeat, but just these small variations will also, over time, add to the stress. And of course, using the heart rate as a guide shouldn't really be a surprise to doctors. But the doctors tend to care more about treating disease. We were not educated in creating health. It's as easy as that. We were created in, or we were educated into defining disease and categorizing the disease, finding out which treatments would be suitable, and that is what we do. And this is a way of creating health to see that you have a good heart rate, you have a good physiology, you have a good VO2 max, you have a good fitness level. Now you avoid uh, things that would make your health worse because the beauty of it is this becomes visible in the heart rate. It's almost like whatever you do that is good for you will improve your heart rate, and whatever you do that is bad for you will make it worse. And with the tiny differences that you can see with these wearables, tracking it in milliseconds, you just have a modern tool that doctors have not really been, we haven't been observing it or looking for it or yeah. So and that is why the Pulse Cure is still, I think, the only book, also internationally, to my knowledge. It's translated into 7 languages. That is a guidebook on how to use the wearables compared to lifestyle strategies and connecting those two things. So it's a huge market.
Mm.
The Garmin watches, the Apple watches, the Aura rings, the Whoop bands. It's huge. It's a
Yes.
multi-billion-dollar probably industry. But still, it has not been so much adapted into the medical society. But it will, and it is being incorporated, as we speak, more and more.
So you're creating a bridge between the biohackers and the doctors.
Yeah.
Like you're creating that
Yeah, and I know,
bridge.
and
Yeah.
of course, the best biohackers they are also doctors. You have doctors being biohackers and having done that for decades.
Mm.
It's only now that it becomes commonplace, and it's only now that the information spreads so fast through podcasts, through YouTube, and the doctors, unfortunately, they are lagging behind.
Right.
At least in Norway, I'm sure
It's
wherever
everywhere.
people,
Yeah.
our listeners are, yeah, I think everywhere. So doctors are almost a very conservative species, it's probably in the nature of it. So, but things now is happening so much faster that I think it's hard for doctors to keep track of it. it's yeah.
So just say someone has their wearable then, and they look at their HRV. The wearable often tells you when the HRV it could be better. So it does tell you
Yeah.
what's good and what's not so good. But in your words, what is considered a low HRV and therefore needs
So,
work?
yeah, so a low HRV, I would say it depends on the age, but certainly if it's in the 20s, it would be on the low side. Um, and probably if you're in the 40s and above, it will be, better. But that is when you look at population-based studies. So there's a huge individuality, and your wearable would calibrate to your state. And the most important for you is to compare yourself only to your own number because the
Mm.
genetic variety is like 50% or more. So, but the tendency is that the lower the heart rate variability, the more strained your body is, the less resources available for your immune system, and the less effective that would be to fight any kind of disease.
Interesting. So that's
And
the that's yeah. So that's the negative of having a low HRV. Like
yeah, that's the
you don't have the
problem. Yeah.
flexibility to deal with diseases, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Usually your autonomic nervous system is stuck in kind of a high gear. You're not able to relax or be calm enough for the immune system to do its work properly.
Mm.
Your mitochondria, it will also have something to do with mitochondria, and that is probably the most important thing to have good energy productions in your cells.
Hmm.
And of course, it's the mitochondria that do that job. And if you have a mitochondrial dysfunction, that will lead to a low heart rate variability. It's just a biometric showing a strained system that is not performing optimally or even normally.
So if someone's dealing with some sort of illness, they would by default have low heart rate variability at that time.
Yeah. So
Right.
you may be able to see that. So if you go from a high or normal heart rate variability and you go to a low one, that even though you are doing, the strategies in the pulse cure or whatever you know is good for you, and it still is low, then it can be the outbreak of any kind of disease, also including cancer, because or infectious disease, or it could be a deficiency in iron or vitamin D or a lot of different reasons. It just shows that your body is struggling with something, and you need to find out or take that into consideration when you are planning your activities. You will have less resources available, just like we can talk also about the menstrual cycle because I can see from the HRV that the week before menstruation for many women, for many busy women, will be as hard as a rough COVID infection.
Wow.
So, and for a week. It could be even longer if you have the PMDD, for example, the premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It could be even longer and even deeper dip in heart rate variability.
Oh,
And that would be important to know so that for that week you're not putting extra strain on yourself. You're
mm.
trying not to eat the comfort foods that you would feel like you needed, right? But that
Maybe
would
not.
only make matters worse and
Yeah.
skip the alcohol and also skip the hard workout and
Hard
do some yoga
workouts.
instead or meditation or
So
whatever. So
interesting.
yeah,
That's
and
really
when you do
interesting.
that, you can also see that you can flatten that curve. So the PMS symptoms are not, they are avoidable. You can avoid most of it when you are able to regulate your stress.
Yeah, that's true because I find when I eat well, my PMS symptoms are a lot less than if I'm not eating very well. So the stress of a bad diet can definitely have an impact. But so what's really interesting is so I was sitting on the couch about a week and a half ago and I downloaded an app for HRV on my Apple phone. And so
Mm,
you just stick your finger on it. I don't know how effective it is, but you just put your finger on it and it tells you your HRV. And at the time, it was 50 something, like 55 or
mm,
something. And I thought, oh, I don't know if that's much good. It was pre-menstrual cycle though. And so what you've
mm,
just said kind of adds up. I mean, someone like me who, I'm nearly 40, relaxing on the couch, HRV of 50 something, 55, let's say. How does that rate in your
Well, that
books?
sounds good. That sounds
Is that
good. Yeah,
okay?
sounds that
Okay.
yeah, that should be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how high does the HRV go? Like how
Oh, it could be
far
more.
can
It
someone
could be
reach?
120. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So like a 25-year-old and 20-year-old that is in good shape could probably have 120.
Mm,
And it will be kind of a hockey stick, reversed hockey stick, from that when it goes quite steep down from your 20 to your 40, and then it flattens out. Which
mm.
is the reason why, of course, athletes, really struggle to be at the top after they reach 35. It's only the
Yes.
exceptions that can keep the motivation going, and their bodies are not as forgiving, so they cannot tolerate as much intensity training and so on.
Okay,
And
okay.
that would be for all of us because the effectiveness of the mitochondria will be significantly lower the older you get. They will struggle harder just to do their basic job, right? And this becomes visible in the heart rate variability.
Right. So would you say like athletes and people who go to the gym often and people who exercise often, would you say they tend to have a higher HRV than someone who doesn't exercise? So does it
Yes,
correlate with
absolutely.
like fitness, basically?
Absolutely. As long as they're not overstraining themselves. And you would see that quite easily also in the heart rate variability, and you may not see it in your heart rate. So I know a lot of athletes have been using heart rate to see whether they are overtrained, but that would not necessarily change that much. I've seen athletes that had maybe 1 or 2 points difference in their resting heart rate, like say from 42 to 44, uh, which would be almost invisible, to
Mm,
see, but their heart rate variability could have a 50% variation, say from 70 to 110, for
right.
example. So it would be much easier. So often I say that heart rate variability is like watching your heart rate with a magnifying glass. So
Mm,
you can tell so much more from the heart rate variability. And from a doctor's point, it's also the beauty of it that the very basic functions in your body, the heart rate compared to your breath, that reveals so much about the state of your physiology. And it's been, probably underestimated the value of that. And of course, now that is available, I think, for example, the cheapest Garmin watch you would probably be getting from 250 US dollars. It should be accessible for anyone. And as a tool for keeping you healthy, it's unparalleled. I know nothing that can help you as much uh, to keep yourself healthy and avoid the energy thieves that you never thought of, like the week before menstruation, like eating gluten, like having that extra glass of alcohol, all of these things. For example, my go-to strategy earlier used to be taking 1 or 2 glasses of red wine every evening. I thought that relaxed me and helped me sleep, and it was just beneficial in every way. It was even recommended by doctors at the time. So, and this proves to be the worst thing you can do.
you're
So
not
it
actually
just
resting,
shows
are
you
you?
how,
You're not actually having
no,
a
you're not
great
dressing
sleep.
at all. It's terrible. It's terrible. I can see from the readouts from my Garmin, I can see that my stress levels throughout the night for like 5 or 6 hours is as high as if I were having a lecture in front of 200 people. It's exactly the same strain on my body. So when I wake up and feel groggy and sluggish, it's not a feeling.
Mm,
It's a physiological, you've been through a physiological thunderstorm, during the night.
yeah.
And And when you see that and measured and quantified, it's so much easier to do something about it and to regulate it. Yeah.
Are there signs that, so just say someone doesn't have a wearable at the moment, are there signs, physical signs they could look out for today that would let them know that their HRV is probably a bit low? Like, are there any physical signs that you can think
Yeah,
of?
I think any kind of fatigue,
Mm.
tiredness, uh, brain fog, not symptoms of many kinds.
Mm.
But it would be hard. It would be hard, if not impossible, to detangle that and understand.
What's caused it
It's
and
hard
why it's
enough
happening?
with the wearables, and so I would think without it, but it would tell you that something's wrong, you know. So
Mm.
it's not normal, I think, to have symptoms.
Mm.
It shouldn't be normal.
We think
Now
it's
it is
normal,
normal. Yeah,
but
we think it's normal now, but it's just that we are surrounded by threats to our systems. We are being inside, we're eating food we're not supposed to eat. Many people are alone. We're drinking alcohol. We are, you know, there's so much that we are not doing that is not okay. So maybe a lot of people are not exercising enough. They have a poor fitness level. They are overweight. Yeah, so there are so many things that gives us trouble
mm.
and creates inflammation in our bodies and makes us sick from the modern day diseases that our immune system is really not equipped to deal with in the first place. And we as doctors usually can only try to mitigate the symptoms from those diseases, unfortunately. So, but having a good and you can Google or maybe now maybe ChatGPT any disease and ask if it has a connection to heart rate variability, and you would find that in most cases it would. So so
Mm.
it's an important measurement.
Okay. So how do we improve HRV then? So, I mean, okay, exercise is a help, right? So you can
Hmm.
exercise and that will help your HRV. You can have a good diet and that will help.
Hmm.
And
That's
generally
right.
just get lots of sleep, live well.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we know about all that stuff. But
Yeah.
is there any exercises we can do? I mean, you mentioned breath work a little bit, breathing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Breath work is a very popular thing at the moment. Can you do
Hmm.
any breathwork exercises that can help with HRV? And what techniques do you use and do you recommend?
Yeah, the most important thing is just to breathe slowly.
Mm.
So that could be 6 breaths a minute, which would, for example, be 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out, somewhere in the neighborhood of that. That's a strong signal to your body that it's calm outside. It's a
Mm.
signal to this old, because the nervous system that regulates this is kind of hundreds of millions of years old and still works pretty much in the same way. That's why I call it in the book, I call it the living fossil in our brains. It's the foundation of our brains that is still, it's just like in our computers that we are working on. It's still working on the binary system of zeros and ones, at the bottom of it.
Right, yeah.
But so this ancient computer system, and our bodies are the same. So we have these advanced thoughts and we can innovate things that, makes it possible to communicate from Cayman Island into Oslo. But still at the bottom of our brains, we have this system that is, with the fight and flight system and the rest and digest system that works pretty much like it always has done. So when we are breathing slowly, it's the same that it would have been 1 million years ago. That if there's an animal out on the savannah that breathes slowly, there's no danger, there's no imminent danger around you. It's a
Mm.
sign to the immune system that you can relax and go grazing or whatever this animal was doing, until there's a new lion showing up at the horizon, and then you get stressed again and need to find out what to do not to be the next meal for that animal. So breathing slowly is maybe the really the best strategy. And of course, the advantage is that it's always where you are. It's invisible. If you are breathing slow now, I wouldn't be able to tell, you know. And so it's always available to you
How often do you
to calm yourself
recommend?
down.
How often do
I,
you recommend doing
I
that?
would rather do it often, many times throughout the day, maybe a minute or two. And often you will find that you catch yourself doing it, without even
Hmm.
doing it consciously. And I think also to become aware of the need for the downtime. So we are surrounded by machines, so we often think that we don't need to relax. But when we put these wearables on hunter-gatherers, tribes that still exist today, we can see that they are in moderate activity 2 to 3 hours a day, and the rest of the time they are relaxing. So this is the intensity that our bodies are constructed for.
Hmm.
So when we are, working all the time, sleeping too little, eating food that we're not supposed to eat, and never really relaxing, like a lot of people do, we're just setting ourselves up for failure, for getting into a fatigue situation with an underperforming immune system that makes the kind of the soil for any kind of disease to come in. Which is why we as doctors are usually we find one disease and we are trying to treat that disease. And for another disease, it may be another cure. But doing the strategies in the pulse cure will be beneficial for all kinds of diseases, just because it will lead to better functioning mitochondria and a better functioning immune system that can deal with all of those, thousands of diseases, that could potentially happen in your body.
Mhm.
So that is why many people are surprised that how can this help for, cancer and heart disease and autoimmune diseases and infectious diseases. It's just because it makes the cells and your basic physiology work better. So
Exactly. I think, like just you said it perfectly. We're in our society now and just our lifestyle is just so based around stress, go, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve. And it's just so out of balance. I mean, you said wearables on tribes, I mean, how do they score on the HRV? Have
oh,
they
they
looked at
have they
that?
have. I'm not sure. I should
Okay.
find out, but they
Yeah,
have
that's
mostly been
interesting.
looking at the intensity, the kind of steps,
Right. So
how much
what
they have
they,
been
right.
moving.
Yeah.
They have been looking more at that, and how much they have been sleeping, and so on.
Hmm.
So
How long
oh,
would someone, how long would it take for, so just say someone starts with what you've just advised. So just say they think, okay, I'm gonna try and reduce my stress a little bit, try and do 6 breaths a minute whenever I can, whenever I have the time. How long would you expect someone to start to improve their HRV? Just say someone is very disciplined and they're quite connected to it. How long do you
It
think? Would it
it
be like
it would
exercise almost, like their fitness
depend.
level
Yeah,
would?
yeah, it would probably be like exercise. So it would probably depend a lot on your where you're starting, your starting
Mm.
point. So say that you're drinking 2 glasses of I did everything wrong. So everything that advice that I do in my book, I
Yeah.
did wrong. Okay, so I weighed 40 pounds overweight, drinking alcohol more or less every day. I was using some kind of nicotine that we use in Norway to put under our lips. I was even smoking at times. Did not care about when I was sleeping. Did not think that it would have anything to do with health at all. Did not care about what I was eating either. Had no strategy for relaxing. So I would wanted to see how my readings were before I started my health journey,
Mm.
which I, by the way, started because my father died at 73, and I understood that, okay, if I want to live as long as possible, I need to understand and learn what I didn't learn in medical school, which is creating health and stay and live longer. So that is when I changed everything. And it was 5 years after that that I became aware that you could use wearables. So I would have loved to see my reading set with that terrible lifestyle. So
Mm.
so of course, if you start from such a poor starting point that I did, your chances of improving or even doubling your heart rate variability is quite high. If you're already doing quite a lot of things okay, and then you start breathwork, for example, then well, the most important thing is to be in control and to have a flexible nervous system so that you're able to use all your forces when you want to, and you're also able to totally relaxed and get into the restful mode when you have the chance. So it's the flexibility that we're looking after and also looking for, and also to be able to know what balance in the system is good for you so that you know where your stress balance is. Because the problem is, it would be like if you are in your car and the fuse to your dashboard, for some reason, makes it so you cannot see your speed. You don't know how much gas is left on the tank. You have no idea about the temperature of the engine or which gear you're in. You don't know the outside or inside temperature and all of these things that we are used to seeing and making choices from having the information. So so when we get this information, then of course it's easier to see that, okay, oh, I'm too stressed today, so I need to relax more tomorrow. And maybe, of course, just like I did yesterday, which was a stressful day just from eating all the leftover cakes, and you would have thought you would have been relaxed here, right?
Right.
And so it's just getting the insight into what's under the hood, so
Yeah.
to speak, in
I
your
love how
body.
you've
That
you've
is,
you've totally reframed how you think about stress. So before you would think, oh, having a birthday over the weekend is a lovely relaxing time. But actually now you're like, oh, that was a stressful day yesterday because you had
hmm,
cake. And
yeah.
I love the way you can
Yeah.
reframe that and other people can do the same.
Yeah, because I was totally surprised when I started this. Then 10 years ago, oh no, no, 7 years ago, I was using an ECG monitor for the first couple of years before I even understood we had it in the watches. And I was just expecting to see total calm because I'm never scared, more or less, never stressed.
Lucky
And
you.
Yeah, or so I thought, but
Mm.
when I saw the readings, I thought it was stress all the time, but not for mental stress.
Not
So of course,
emotional. Yeah.
when a lot of people think about stress, they're only thinking about emotional stress or too much pressure or not enough time to do what they need to do and so on. So, of course, when you're trying to stress down and that's only the things you're trying to look for, then you will miss your target. It's only when you see, okay, the stress comes from all of these other surprising sources. They are, so to speak, like I do in lectures, I often show is like just the tip of the iceberg is the mental stress. Below there, there's all of these other sources of stress that you would never have thought about. But
Wow.
your heart responds to it. The heart will respond to any demand on it, and so that's how you can see the things that you never even thought about.
Do you have any thoughts on nasal breathing? Because I have
Hmm.
because that's a topic that I'm quite interested in at the moment, especially when it comes to exercise. And so just as you know, if you're a mouth breather, if you're somebody who breathes through the mouth throughout the day, then that's you should really try and breathe through your nose throughout the day. Does that have much of an impact in terms of breathing on the heart rate
Hmm.
variability?
Yeah, it would. And so many people who starts taping their mouths at night,
Yes.
they can see that their heart rate variability gets better.
Oh, that's
So that would, of
interesting.
course, be if they are mouth breathers in the first place. So for me, it's not so much of a difference. So I'm obviously usually sleeping with my mouth shut.
Hmm.
Other things that I would be able to see is that the temperature of this bedroom would be
Mm.
really make a huge difference.
How so?
So yeah, so if you have in centigrades, it would be from 15 to 18 centigrade would be a good. I think that corresponds to 60 to 65 in Fahrenheit or somewhere around that. Um, to have a cool bedroom would
Mm.
help you to sleep better.
Right.
So when I'm going to the Caribbean in a month or so, and it's still summer there, and I think the lowest night degree would be 26 centigrades. I know that that will be stressful for me. So I have to take that into consideration that sleep in that environment is totally different when it comes to recovery from sleeping in the controlled environment that I have at home. So I just need to know about it and just, yeah, see what I can do about it. Yeah.
What other strategies do you recommend though then? So 6 breaths a minute is one strategy. Do you have
Mhm.
any other ways that someone can kind of take a quick route to improving their
A
HRV?
cold shower, yeah, a cold shower. Yeah,
Cold
cold
shower.
therapy. Yeah, you would
Yes.
see it immediately.
Much more popular in
Of
Oslo,
course,
that
when
that kind of
yeah,
lifestyle. Yeah.
yeah, it's very popular. And the interesting thing is that all cold societies
Mm.
would have this kind of sauna and cold. This going into the cold and then into the sauna. It's like in all northern latitudes
Yeah.
cultures.
I heard that
So
going from sauna to ice bath sauna or sauna to cold, hot to cold, hot to cold is really great for your cardiovascular system and your cardiovascular fitness. And this kind of like fits really well with that. I just out
mm,
of interest, I interviewed an author of this incredible book. She's from the US, but she lived in oh God, the city that is the furthest, that is the closest to the north, the most northern city there is in the world. I've forgotten what it's called though.
mm,
But basically, it's one of the Scandinavian cities, and it's dark basically 2 months of the year. And she just went through their lifestyle, and she was like, they celebrate the darkness, and it's basically a daily thing to go from hot to cold, hot to cold. So they love the saunas, they love going into the cold swims, and apparently in a lot of Scandinavian countries, like a sauna is very normal and they have them in their
yeah,
homes and it's like a daily thing. Whereas if you
yeah.
cut on this side of the world or like let's say the UK where I'm from, it's not a normal thing. It's like really, it's a kind of like a special thing. It's like a treat
Hmm.
for yourself. Whereas where you're from, it's the norm. It's like a daily thing. It's like, why wouldn't you do
Yeah,
this?
a lot of people use it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a social thing too, so that
Social,
many
yeah.
people go to the sauna instead of the cafe or pub. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So and but the advantage in your place in the Caribbean is that you have the
Mhm.
sun exposure. So we can also see that sun exposure is really important.
Okay.
And the book that I'm writing now actually is about sun exposure,
Oh,
the
so tell
importance
me a
of
bit about
it.
that because I got a lot of sun exposure yesterday. I mean, I'm looking at my face now. It's like I caught the sun quite a
Mm,
bit yesterday. I'm very
yeah, but
pink.
if it only gets a bit pink the day after for 24 hours, it's still good.
Is that
So
okay?
it's
So,
only when you get the blisters and
okay.
get it a bit rougher that's when it's not so healthy. But anyway, it's what we know more about now is how the both the UV light and the different visible light and infrared light will affect our cells and mitochondria in a productive way. UV light will release nitric oxide that is stored in our skin. The infrared light will affect the mitochondria. It will improve the production of ATP. It will improve production of melatonin in the mitochondria, making the whole process of creating energy more efficient. Um, of course, it will make vitamin D which is really important in almost any kind of disease that you can think of course.
Mm,
And it will not be so connected to melanoma that we have been scared of. We
really?
have been scared out of the sun because of the risk of melanoma, but it seems not to have this direct connection.
Would you say it's more the
Uh,
sunscreens? Because that's very popular at the moment that people are looking at sunscreens now and saying, well, actually, the rates of skin cancer went up since we started using sunscreen.
Yeah,
Would you
there
say
are
that lines up?
research. Yeah, there would be research showing that when you use sunscreen, that you could have a higher incidence of melanoma.
Mm,
So anyway, it's at least it's not very effective. It's not so that you can have sunscreen and then think that, okay, I have protected myself 100% against skin cancer. It would be, from what I'm seeing, at best, a 10 to 20%
mm.
reduction, and most of the melanoma will be evenly distributed on your skin. It will not, which shows that it does not depend so much on the sun exposure.
Good point.
So, but the basal cell carcinoma and what's the other, squamous cell carcinoma would tend to be on the areas where you have exposed mostly to the sunlight, on your head, on your nose, on your ears, where you're going unprotected. And the more you get sunburned and the intermittent sun exposure, and also for the squamous cell carcinoma, the cumulative exposure of sunlight is what this it will make it more probable that you get those kind of cancers. But they're not as lethal. They're troublesome. You need to cut them out and so on. So that is, of course, leaving scars, and on some places in the face, it can be,
Mm,
not what you want to place to cut. So I think the most important then probably would be to protect your head and your ears and so on, but preferably by being out of the sun at the most time of the highest UV exposure, maybe using a hat, and then maybe also use sunscreen. I don't think it would matter much or be dangerous.
yeah.
Just use sunscreen, on your skin, on your head and ears and so on.
Yeah.
So
So,
there's, but
yeah.
there's the most important is to have enough sun exposure. You
Mm,
don't need to stay out in the sun a lot, but so the you because now we're living inside almost all the time. I think the average American is inside 95% or so
yeah.
of the time. And we are not made for that.
Mm,
So there will be a price to pay in less efficient cells that are lacking sun exposure. And there's a huge research from Sweden that shows that stay avoiding sunlight is as dangerous as smoking.
wow.
Okay, so there's quite a huge magnitude of effect. And that, of course, is in the very northern latitudes. So it may be easier further down to the Mediterranean or the Caribbean. You probably would need to go out into the sun maybe for 15 minutes to get the same amount of sun effects that maybe you would need 2 hours, in Norway or Sweden. And you would get it faster because the sun is just more stronger,
So,
right?
so what would you recommend then? Because, for example, in the UK, it's grey, it's dreary, it's miserable most of the time. I mean,
Yeah.
those people, if any of those are listening right now, they'd be like, well, as if I'm going to get any sun. Like, as if, like, I'm looking up and it's just grey.
Yeah, that, and
So,
it
what
will,
do you
yeah, it
recommend?
will, it will pass through the clouds. So,
Okay.
and the infrared will even pass through clothes.
Okay, I didn't know
So,
that.
and you would need to get the sun that is there. So even
Mm,
during the winter, a half hour, an hour of sunlight in the middle of the day would matter.
mm,
And there's a huge biobank study from the UK that shows that those who get the most sun live longer, and their chances of getting heart disease and cancer is dramatically lower. Or I would say from like 25% less heart disease and 15% less cancer, all cause cancer.
Mm.
So getting sunlight and sun exposure is actually something you can do to prevent cancer and not just the risk of getting it that is getting more and more debated whether that is real.
Can I ask then, just to change the subject ever so slightly, when it comes to certain ways of eating, so for example, I experimented with the carnivore diet not so long ago, and I had lots of benefits. I could, I felt my skin was much better, and I felt a lot, I had a lot more energy, and I just felt good in myself. I'm not doing it now though because it was just a little bit too extreme for me. But people who like to experiment with, let's say, the keto diet, and so they're cutting out carbohydrates altogether, would that have an effect on HRV? Like, is that a stress response on the body? Do you know much
It could
about
be,
that?
yeah, and that could be also very much individual variations.
Right.
Somebody would get a better heart rate variability. Others, it could be worse, and it could be temporarily, and so on. So, and this is also important that these measurements shows your individual response to
It can be
something,
different from
and
person to person.
it could be different from different people. And the problem with the normal way that we doctors use information from population-based studies is that we get an average. And that is not necessarily or probably not useful for you. So, for example, the average step count of hunter-gatherers is, I think, 16,000 steps a day, right? That's the average. When you
Yeah,
see
the average,
it
well.
when you see it in the individual dots, like you can see on a graph, you see it's all over. So for if you just pick out one person, it would be 5,000 steps, and another person 30,000. So this average is useless, other than knowing the average. So these, for example, some people can tolerate alcohol better or worse. For me, it's horrible. For other people, it's just a small dent in their stress levels.
Okay, so you just
So
recommend just to wear your wearable, track it, and then, see if that particular diet is working for you. And you can
yeah,
say that's
yeah.
the great thing about having this information, right?
Yeah. And even if the food could stress you, it would not necessarily be bad, because maybe it's just a sign that this food needs a lot of digestion, so to speak, effort in digesting these complex food. In other cases, it's just your heart rate goes up because of the inflammation caused by the food that you're just giving your body. It could be milk proteins, it could be gluten, as I said, it could be other stuff that just creates an inflammation in your intestines, and that is the reason why your heart rate goes up. In other cases, it could then be because, okay, it's a huge piece of meat, it just takes a lot of work to digest that. So you would also need to to
Decipher
um,
between
to
that
take that
and
into
to make your,
consideration. And
yeah,
yeah,
I suppose you
and
could look
and
at,
and like me,
yeah,
I kind of tolerate chili, for example. When
actually.
I eat something with chili, it's just almost the same effect as alcohol. It creates a huge strain on my system. I will sleep terribly. And of course, I did not know about that until I started tracking this, because until I started tracking these things, I would never even have started to consider that how I felt in the morning would have anything to do with what I was eating 12 hours earlier. It would not even, you know, be a thought in my mind.
So food intolerance tests where people can spend hundreds of dollars on food intolerance tests.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sending off a blood sample, the sample gets tested against different foods, and then they get a report back saying, you know, you don't tolerate red meat, you don't tolerate dairy, but you can tolerate oats, you can tolerate rice, you can tolerate. So it's kind of like a red, amber, kind of green
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Yep.
But really, you could do that using a wearable. You could just look at your
Yeah,
heart rate and see how it
you could.
responds.
Yeah. And if it's easy, if it's just one or two or three things, then it's a lot easier.
Yeah,
But so many people will have, like they would have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. They may have leaky gut. They may have 10 or 15
different things.
different
Yeah.
foodstuffs, right?
Yeah, if you
And
tend to have an
that will
allergy,
make it
yeah,
almost impossible to find
yeah,
out.
that's true. That's
So,
true.
and even for me, it was quite difficult. So in the end, I just did a food intolerance test that showed that I cannot tolerate gluten and milk. It's not among the worst, but I could see that there was stress on the system. And when I eat food that does not contain that is when I have the lowest degree of stress. And the problem with the IgG tests would also be that you can find the antibodies in your blood does not necessarily mean that they are the culprit.
Mm.
They could be kind of passengers. It's just like I imagine it like, okay, somebody breaks into a store, leaving all the doors open, right? And then other people take advantage of the opportunity that would otherwise not break in. But once the store is open and they see, wow, that's just what I want just inside there, I'll take it too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of um, but what would be useful is to cut out all the different foodstuffs that gives a result then and then heal your gut lining, and then maybe introducing one on one and see if you react to it.
Yeah, that's good advice. So, I mean, just to kind of round things up then, is there anything else that you think someone really needs to know about HRV? Like they're going to go on their journey now, maybe purchase a wearable. Do you have a preferred
Hmm.
wearable? I mean,
Yeah,
you're wearing
yeah,
them all at the moment. So, what's your
yeah,
favorite?
yeah, and the by far best and most also cheapest, luckily, is the
The
Garmin watches.
Garmin. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you would get from a Forerunner 165 would be, to my knowledge now, the cheapest one that is also good, which would probably around $250. And of course, you get them all the way up to $1,000.
Mm.
Like the one I have is probably $1,000 or even more. And they would give you the best data. And
Okay.
of course, if you really want to have an analog watch or you don't want to watch, and the Aura Ring, I think would be the best choice. But I also like the Whoop band.
Mm.
So they have the different pros and cons, but by far I would say Garmin is the best choice.
Okay, okay. So is there anything else you think someone needs to know if then they're going to start on their HRV journey?
I think that they could start by doing no changes. So you
Like
just get the
start from where
watch,
you're at.
you let it calibrate itself. You just observe passively what is happening so that you have a baseline from the lifestyle that you have now, and then you can start doing one thing at a time. Because if you do too many things at a time, you don't know what is affecting it, right? So, and to be patient.
Mm.
So, little by little, I'm still learning still now after 6 years or so with wearables.
Mm.
So don't be too impatient. And of course, many people will see that they are far more stressed than they would hope for.
Mm.
And but they're just it's just a reality check. This is a strain on your body, and
And
yeah.
if you have this strain, that can lead to disease, basically, and that's the whole point of this, like to prevent
Yeah.
disease.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
To get a sustainable level of stress in your life. So, and to have a variation. So you're supposed to have rough days and easy days and rough weeks and easy weeks and so on. So just and we don't know what perfect is. So it's just to have something that is, you know, increases your chances of living a disease-free and long life, which is possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely.
And of course, it would help to have my book, of course, and it's also available as an audiobook. So,
Lovely. So the Pulse Cure, which
mhm.
is a great title. How can people follow you? How can people find you after this?
Oh, they can find me on Instagram. I have two Instagrams. I think I'll spend more time on the English speaking one, but it's also the smaller one. It's doc underscore Torkil. I also have a mixed Norwegian English one, which is dr.torkil, which is considerably larger. But of course, there's a lot of Norwegian content, and most people don't speak Norwegian, so.
Oh, lovely. And Torkel, that was such a great conversation. And I feel so motivated right now. And I feel like I need to buy a Garmin. I need to get back on this because I
You would,
used
yeah, you
to,
would probably have a really good results, I would guess, and you probably have a good VO2 max level as well. So
yeah, I mean, I had a Whoop. I enjoyed it, but then I just kind of we just stopped. Like me and my husband, we just stopped after a while. But I feel like I want to get back into it, and there's been reasons why I wanted to get back into it anyway, for like fitness reasons. But now this is another reason to get in. Maybe I'll try a Garmin and start following the HRV. So
mm,
thank you so much. I do hope we get to chat again at some point soon.
yeah, that would be cool. So thanks
Lovely.
you for having me on your show. Thank you.